Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming to my session. I was actually kind of surprised at how well the AI program kind of matched the environment. It was pretty good at coming up with those things. My name is Rich Faulkner. I've been in the end user computing space since when I first heard about WinFrame 1.7. I kind of told people, didn't we get away from terminals? I mean, wasn't that the point of going to computers and stuff, and then wound up making a career out of end user computing and stuff. Then in 2005, was it, I think, Citrix bought NetScaler, and I said, I'll never mess with that. It's a networking device. I'm a server guy, and then now I'm a heavy NetScaler guy. So now when I'm talking to people, I tell them I'll never win the lottery. Because it seems like every time I say no, that's whatever is going to happen with you. Okay. I've been there for, I was looking at this last night, coming up with the deal, and I realized that next year it will actually be 30 years that I've been doing end user computing. Where did all that time go? This session is going to be covering automating or Git-Ops functions with the Citrix toolkit for NetScaler and for the Citrix DAS or on-prem desktop environments. But I want everybody to understand that the way the toolkit is set up, the way this repo is set up, that you could take out Azure and you could put in AWS. You could take out AWS or whoever, and you could put in Nutanix or Zen Server or whichever for the hosting. In doing some research, I did find that while a lot of the other DAS environments and so forth do enable some automation, most of it's through PowerShell scripting and API calls. They don't really have a lot of support for Terraform libraries and Ansible and so forth. So I'm hoping that we can encourage them to add that capability in the future, because the ability to rebuild your environment is phenomenal, in my opinion. I was at a Citrix Connect last year in Washington, and I heard about a certain financial institution in New York City that the name begins with a couple of initials, that has 50,000 desktops that they rebuild every 30 days. So they get a brand new Windows image every 30 days. And so you think about the ability, not only from a security standpoint, because how long could somebody be in your image, right? If I rebuild it every 30 days, I'm limiting that threat. But additionally, if a problem comes up, how long does it take me to rebuild and build that up and go away from it? So we're okay for right now, I think. We'll see. Right. So, I thought this was great, and I kind of played around with it and got into some things. And then when the call for papers for this conference came up, I submitted a recommendation. Hey, I would like to try this out, and they accepted it. So then I had to build the environment. So it was kind of motivational to get things moving. As we get, we're not doing. All right, how's that? There we go. All right. So I'm going to take a moment to say thank you to the sponsors. Without that, and none of this would be possible. This is a great venue. The availability and the swag and the other stuff that are here, it's pretty cool. So thank these guys. When you get a chance, go out, visit their booths, and make it worth their while for being here. So the next time we want to do one of these, we can. Okay. So the point of infrastructure as code is that I stop, I heard the term ClickOps, and you saw it in my title. ClickOps is, I'm doing an install and I click, next, finish, right? And I've got to go and make sure that everybody who does that knows which boxes to check, which dots to cut, cross, and so forth when I'm doing that install. With infrastructure as code, I'm going to set that up in a file that has all those settings already in there. It's got guardrails on it, so I can make sure that people aren't making changes that they shouldn't be doing. And I'm also giving myself the ability then to submit a change, pull request that people can go and look through and see, this is what I'm planning on changing, right? Then when I run my plan, it'll come up and say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And it gives me that last chance to look. Because when I get into automation, one of the biggest fears in automation, and I think Esther covered a little bit earlier, is is it going to do something I'm not expecting, right? I want to make sure that when these changes are made, it's not going to actually blow up something. So when I make it fast and scalable, that also means I can screw up in a very fast way in a very large scale, right? So I got to make sure that what I'm doing is in there, and I want to be able to see what changes did we make over time, when did we make them, who made the change, etc., so that I can go back and audit. If there's something comes in, I can go back and see where that was input and put in place. So what we're really going to talk about is that the problem that we have is that production is trapped in the console, right? So I have to open up the management console and see how is this configured in order to know what the environment is going on, right? Rebuilds then become very risky because I've got to make sure that not only do I understand what's going on in the console, but the people who chose those, right? Why did I pick this selection when I did the next finish? Why am I choosing those different reasons? Why am I asking this point on here? I don't always have that. I don't always have the reasoning written down. I don't really always have the reason why we went that direction sitting there. So the shift is to then move everything into a Git repository that is auditable, changeable, and if you've ever noticed, one of the things you got to be very careful when you're doing a Git repo is don't ever put a password in there because you can't get that password out of it. Git is always replayable. I can always go back to previous versions of things to see what was there. So I want to make sure that when I go through this on the Git, it gives me the ability to do a review of what is changing, and I'm going to show you that a little bit in the demos, how I can review what's going on. It also lets me see the validation, automated validations and stuff that I can go through to make sure that I'm not blowing something up. And so what I wind up with is an environment that's easy to reason. And then if I need to, if CrowdStrike happens or something like that comes along, I can rebuild this environment in a very rapid and quick way. I don't have to go back and go, okay, open up all the screens and let me follow along. What clicks do I need to do? I can just say Terraform apply, and 20 minutes later, my environment's back where it was when I was going on. And one of the other things I like about it is you can still run through on a Terraform plan, and you can actually tell plan to run like every 8 hours. And if it sees any changes, let me know. Right? Because if I'm not expecting my environment to change, then if somebody goes into a management console, makes a change that I'm not expecting, then Terraform Plan is going to come back and say, hey, I'm going to make this change to put it back where it was. Not only can you make the change to reset your environment back to where it should be, but you also know that somebody modified something, right? It gives you that alert to go in and see what I need to go look at. So what we're going to do is today we're going to talk about, first of all, why does ClickOps break? What does it break down? You get the drift, tribal knowledge. What did the last guy know that it doesn't work here anymore, right? We don't have any auditability. It's very hard to keep track of who made what changes and so forth. And oh, back. Okay. Then we're going to move into what the Git-Ops operating model will allow for us to do. And when we say Git-Ops, it's not just storing stuff in GitHub, and it can be GitHub, Git, whatever flavor you're running with. But Git-Ops is the actual actions that will happen either automated or manually to actually enforce or put in that plan. So I can set up a setting in the GitHub Actions that says when a merge is completed, after an hour, go and run these actions, right? So all I have to do, instead of having to go in and manually change stuff, I can go in and say, after this point, do this. The way the skeleton repository that I'm going to make available to everybody when we're done with this is set up right now is it will go on Thursday after Patch Tuesday, and it will create a new Windows image for both the Windows 11 group and the Windows Server group, for published applications, and then put those out into Azure, make them available to be changed later, and then actually go out and create a new machine catalog with that account or with those images. And then once it's got that completed, it'll run a drain on the current existing images, so disable those images and move everything over on the delivered groups into the new images. Once all of those images are done, then it will go and delete the old images out. Okay, and it may not, the delete of the old images out, I would recommend wait, let it sit, because, a lot of times you find the problem a week later, I need to roll back, so I want to have that image back there and available. And of course, even if you did delete it, I can go roll back the GitHub actions, I can roll back the files and then recreate the environment as it existed before I delete it, okay? So we're gonna go through that. I'll walk you through the repository that I've got created to show you some ideas. And again, what I've got is a skeleton, all right? It's not, don't take it, you can fork it over and then put it in production on your environment, go through, make the changes you need to. There's some pretty good documentation. AI is fantastic at creating readmes. That's one of my favorite things is documenting what did I do. And then we'll go through what a monthly rebuild pattern might look like. And then I've got some suggestions on what you might use for an adoption roadmap. Okay, so how would I adopt this in my environment later? And I'm out of there. All right. So first of all, we're going to talk about why does Git-Ops break? What is it that breaks up our stuff? I generated some, and these are some actual images I used to do on my social media. I had a bunch of minifigs, and I would post pictures up, when I was going to Synergy or going to Discover or whatever functions, I would take pictures of the guys. And so this was everybody getting a group photo. Yeah. I think that was a Gartner conference in Vegas. So the first thing is Git-Ops feels fast, right? It feels like I'm real quick because I can just click, next, finish, and it goes through and everything. The problem is that when something doesn't work right, then somebody else comes in and they have to go click, okay, make this change, finish, and then nobody documents that. Why did I change that? What was the problem that caused me to have to choose that different setting and so forth? And I have to be able to go into the console, search through all the different functions to try and figure out what happens. What you don't see is that intent, right? Why did I choose those? Why do I want this environment to look the way it does? And what is this environment then dependent upon? Okay, so as you'll see in the repo that I've got, it builds the Active Directory domain controllers. It builds the cloud connectors. It builds the agent for the NetScaler and joins it to your cloud console. Again, it has all that information in there. Those are all dependencies that if I didn't know, if I was just rebuilding the environment, I would go throw 2 NetScalers up there and wonder why I can't get any licensing, right? I've got to know that I've got that dependency, that functionality that I have to have in there, all right? And so what that does for you is that you do wind up with, it takes a long time to rebuild my environment. If there's any problems that come up, it takes me quite a while to get things fixed up. The second thing is when you do a change, it makes it the possibility that there could be issues that arise from that. And makes people want to not mess with the environment, right? A lot of people are like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Don't touch yourself for that reason, because I don't know for sure what I'm going to break, and I don't know for sure if I do break something, what do I have to do to get it back? Okay. So common failures in the EUC environments, the drift, right? So I started out with this intention here, and we, Michael can recommend or back me up on this. We build an environment, get it set up for a customer, and everything. We come back 6 months later, it looks nothing like what we set up because they've made the change. I got adjusted this. I can tell you one of the worst things I ever saw. I built an environment for a doctor's group, and in Citrix back in probably like Metaframe 6.5 days. But had it all set up, the application's working great, all the rest of it. 6 months later, they call me, man, this thing is a bunch of junk. It doesn't work for nothing. I said, all right, well, come up, take a look. I go in there and take a look at it, and they had 250 users, and amazingly had 250 domain admins. And so everybody had full rights to all of the machines. So, they were like, I can't understand. In the middle of the day, the machine will just shut down. Well, somebody said, start, shut down. And they had the rights to shut down the shared service and the shared resources, right? So that's where, that's that drift. That's that problem that we run into. Who made the change? Why did they make it? And how do I get it back to what I want to do? I basically wound up having to rebuild the entire environment. They had screwed it up so bad that I could not do it. So that moves us on to our next part. When I rebuild it, how do I make sure that I rebuilt it exactly the same way I did 6 months ago, right? So I run into that issue of, did I check all the boxes? Did I miss a section or anything? I mean, I just did a evolution for a customer the other day, and there was a policy that I thought I had applied on the NetScaler for enabling logins for one of the groups, and the policy had failed to apply because the action didn't exist. I didn't realize that, so the policy didn't apply. It looked like it was there, when you were looking through, but all of a sudden those users weren't able to log in. And have a simple fix, apply the, enable the action, apply the policy, and we're good to go. But it's still, you run into those, that's that environment or challenge that you run into, all right? The audit gaps, again, how do I make sure who made the change, when did they make it, and so forth. And then how do I review that, right? So if I'm doing click, 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 next, who's reviewing what I'm clicking and nexting, right? There's no follow-on for that and everything. And so all of those things build up a fear level of making changes, right? So customers are thinking about having a change in their environment, and they're like, I don't know what's going to happen, it's going to break. These things are going to go on. So what we need to do to shift that mindset is to get that out of the Git-Ops, right? So we want to make sure that when we change an object, we don't change it in the console. We make sure that we change it using the infrastructure as code. And that can be a challenge, and we'll talk about it a little bit in the ending part where, how you roll it out, the 30, 60, 90-day plan to roll this out. First thing you're going to have to do is get your people to stop making the changes in the console, because Terraform or Ansible are going to come along and go, nope, it's not supposed to be there, and undo whatever they did. Right? Infrastructure and code allows me then to define what I want. Right? What is my desired environment look like? What controls do I have? What permissions are given, etc. I get all that ready to go. And then when I move on to Git-Ops, Git-Ops just takes that plan and deploys it for me. Okay, and it deploys it in a manner which I can do either manually or automatically to get that desired environment. So what does the Git-Ops operating model look like? I think some of you might recognize the venue with that one was taken. So in the Git-Ops, what happens is the developer or whoever's doing the work is going to branch the Git repository. I'm going to make my changes. I'm going to get all that stuff set up ready to go. Then when I've got everything set up the way I want to, and the beauty of the branch is I can have a dev environment over here that I can actually run applies and all the rest of this and test on the dev environment without affecting production. Make sure that what changes I've made are getting me what I want. Then I'm going to issue a pull request. And the pull request, when it comes in, that's where you're going to want to have multiple people review the pull request, right? Go and look. The pull request will show this was set this way, now it's going to be set this way, and you go make sure, okay, this is what I want. I want this to change. I want the machine catalog name to change to match the current month image that it's going. I want, the number of machines to change, whichever it is, right? So you can run through that. Then on the validate side, in the Git-Ops, you can actually have it go and check, make sure the Terraform files are in the proper format, right? I'm going to do a validate. Do I have, are the commands that I'm trying to run, are they actually commands that the Terraform environment will run, right? And then I'm going to run a scan and a lint on it. And the scan, definitely want to run the scan, because what it's going to do is it's going to go through and look and say, did they save an administrator password in one of these files? Is there, am I opening up a set? And then even some of the variables that I can put in, when I put in the variable, I can put it in as a standard variable, or I can put it in as a secure variable. And the difference that makes, what most people don't realize, is that if it's a secure variable, that's when I go to type something in and it doesn't show anything on the screen, because it recognizes this variable is secure. I don't want to display the typing that people are doing, okay? So I want to make sure when I'm deploying these out of here, if it's a variable that needs to be secure, it's listed as a secure variable. Once that's done, I run through the plan. The plan is going to go in and say, okay, this is what my current environment looks like. This is what the change is going to look like. These are the changes you're going to make. And so then I can look at my plan and go, okay, that's what I intended to do. Let me go ahead and go forth. And then I can go through with the apply. When I run the apply, it actually goes out and makes the changes on the environment. And then we can observe what happens. That still has a human in control, because I've got the review to go through and see what's going on. And I can make sure that all of my stuff is in a consistent state. Okay. The repository that I've got is for doing some teaching and so forth. So there's an infrastructure workloads are set in there right now. The ones we'll see today have to do with the NetScaler and DAS. There's a documentation script in there. You'll also see, if you go to the repository, you'll see one for Nutanix. You'll see one for VDI. So there's some other repos and stuff that I was working on to try and plug into some of those other locations as well. So the pipeline flow is, I'm going to come in, edit the config, open my pull request. We'll send it out for validation, do the plan and the apply. The way the plan and the apply are right now is they're set at in manual mode, but you could set the plan on automatic. So as soon as it sees the pull request come through as approved, it will run the plan and make sure that that's set through there. Again, same with the apply. What some of those look like, the good plan review means it's going to have somebody who understands the environment. So I've made the change on it. I would send it to Michael. Michael would review and say, yes, what Rich is doing on those NetScalers makes sense, right? And we want to make sure that that doesn't go through. And then again, I showed you the different parts on the format. I'm going to check and make sure that everything's formatted correctly and ready to go. And what that does is allows the teams to understand what's expected. What's going to happen when I put this through? What can I see when it is employed or applied? So on the GitHub action side, once it's validated on the pull request, it's going to run the Terraform init without any action on our end, so it can make sure that if there are any Terraform libraries it needs, it will pull those down right away and so forth. Then it's going to check the formatting, and then we want to put in a lint and a scan gate in the action so that it will automatically go through and check for the security part and the configuration and kick out and say if there's an issue, hey, look, you're not using OIDC or whichever, all right? Then we can do the plan on the demand, so we can go through and do these and deploy from the main functions. Sorry, lost my train of thought for a second. So it currently separates all of those out. Any of those things right now, my repo has got the plan and the apply and everything are in different steps. You can combine those down once you've got your configuration set the way you want it to go. The part that makes it safe, first of all, my identities, I'm going to use OIDC in Azure or whatever function, AWS, whatever other functions I need to, so that the credentials are not stored on the machine. They're not stored in GitHub for somebody to pull them out. When you go pull down the repo, you're not going to find how to log into our demo or our lab environment, etc. The state, I use a shared Terraform state, so it's not going to use a local state from my machine. I've actually got it stored in a blob storage on Azure, and then that requires authentication. So before I can read what the state is or what the expected state is, I have to be authenticated through there. And then in GitHub Actions, you can save the secrets in there. The secrets are not on display. If I'm going to make a change, I type in the new secret. Let's say, because obviously the machines need to join the domain, right? So domain join password, if I go to look at that secret and pull it up, there's nothing going to be displayed in there. I'd have to type in a new one at that point. Okay, and when I type it in, you can see it, but then as soon as it saves, it's gone. You can't see it again. But that means that I'm not storing those in the repo. Okay, a couple of things on the differences between Terraform and Ansible. If you're not, how many people here use Terraform and Ansible on a regular basis? Okay, just a few. So the biggest differences you can see is Terraform does a lot of the declarative state, right? What is my infrastructure? What do I want it to look like? Ansible can do much of that as well, but Ansible does a real good job of, after I've made the state, what do I want it to look like, right? So after I've got this configured, do I need to modify some file for the antivirus program that I'm running? Do I need to make a change to some setting in the registry somewhere that is not going to be part of what I do in Terraform? So that's where the Ansible comes in for the functionality on this. So for this environment, the OS is built using Packer, right? Once the Packer's environment set, I create an image in Azure, and then from that image, I can use the Citrix environment to go and pull in the other information. Okay, so now we're going to go on a repo tour. I'm going to go ahead and switch out of here. So we get there. All right. So I'm a big fan of Git-Kraken. I don't know if you ever had a chance to mess with that application, but it does a really good job of keeping track of what's going on. But the biggest thing I like is you can see that I have a change in my directory. I go there, work in progress, and you can see it's just, I ran a plan earlier. I've actually got a rule that only opens a firewall hole to the IP address that I'm coming from on this laptop. And because of our VPN, I have to do that quite often. I have to make that change because it changes the IP address on a random basis for no reason in the middle of the day while I'm doing something, and all of a sudden my PuTTY session disconnects. All right, so when I go to stage the change, the nice thing about this is This little button over here is an AI, and I just go and put it up, and it's going to come in and do an examination of what changed in the file, and it's going to come up and tell me. But rather than waiting for that one, I'm actually going to go here, and you can see these are the changes that were made on the different files, and I can pull up like this DAS auto TFRs. I wanted to go in here and say I actually took out the username, right? So even I had the secret in there for password. I didn't really want the username also to be in there, so I've gone and taken that out. So you can see on the top section it had the admin, local admin. On the bottom, it's gone. Now it's a variable that I have to pull from the secrets. Okay, very nice to be able to follow back through what was I doing, what was I changing. And you can see that it has now said, yeah, it's pretty basic. I'm just doing an update on the Terraform plan. But if I do this one here, and I go to look at here's the added catalog entries so it actually does a really good job of taking a look at what are the differences and then generating a documentation. So you can see from an auditing standpoint, I can go back and look and say, okay, that's what this change made. The other nice thing is it does let you come in with the branches. You can see the different branches here as they came up, so I can see when I did that branch, what was I doing in there, and then I did a merge pull request. Why did I pull? What did I pull in, and so forth. So now I've got my documentation sequence. I've got my follow through. I can see what changes were made. Okay. The repository looks like this. All right. So you can see there's quite a bit, and like I said, if you go, this is the Nutanix Terraform function. But if you go to infrastructure here, you can see I've got Foundation, and the Foundation items, those are Active Directory, Cloud Connector, NetScaler Agent. That's what's in the Founder. Those are the requirements, right? The dependencies that I have to have in order for that to work. Then I come into my workloads, and you can see in the workloads there's a Citrix, there's my DAS, and NetScaler. These are the two ones that you're going to see most of that we work with today. And then, so from a Terraform file, I've got all my information in there. And the other thing I like about AI is it does a really good job of explaining what that is done. So I can create a README very easily, and it actually looks at what are the files, what's happening in there, and then it creates a good Terraform information for that. Okay. And so you can see the environment here. These are the Azure. This is the back-end side. Okay, so I've got my ADCs going, I've got domain controllers, I've got the cloud connectors, I've got my agent, and then I use that Bastion machine. It's in Ubuntu, so it allows me to run Terraform actually in Azure locally that's where I build my Packer. I run the Packer commands from that, so I'm not pulling it down to my desktop, running the stuff, pushing it back up to Azure when I'm done. It actually runs it in Azure and is able to copy the information back and forth. Okay, then you have the VS Code. So there's a DAS auto TFR. So to give you an idea what we can do, so you can see here's my 2026-05, and I've got a 2026-04. So that's April and May, right? So I've done my monthly rebuild. I've got that set in there. But since this is my image version, you can see I've changed my image version numbers. When I create the Packer file, I tell it I want this to be the image version. You can make that anything you want for the image version, just as long as you know what that is. And you can also automate the naming of that image version. So I'm going to come in here and say, okay, I don't think 5 desktops is enough. We're going to go ahead and change that to 10. And this is I've got 2022 apps. I haven't upgraded yet to 2025, but we're going to go ahead and change that one to 5. So now when I come in and I do a save on that file, you can go here and see so now I have the DAS file changes been made. Okay, I push that up there. I'm going to go ahead and let the commit message get generated. So see, it tells you I increase the number of DAS and machine counts for pool, etc. And it gives you a good description down at the bottom. I'm going to commit that change. Then I'm going to push that up, and you see how on the left over here it shows that the two mains are separate. Now it shows the two mains together, so that lets me know that I've pushed that up to GitHub. That repo is up there now. So now if I go into my repository here, I can go to my actions. Now the my monthly DAS apply is failing because I have an error on Citrix. One of the images I tried to create before, it did not have the MCS capabilities built into it, and so it errors out trying to deploy that, but it won't let me delete it because I have an image, but it won't let me put the image out there because it's broke. So it's like, you know, roundy, I'm gonna probably have to open the ticket so I can get in there and delete that one out of there. So that's what the apply is. But we're gonna look, for today, we're just gonna go through the plan. You can see I can come here and run on this plan. I can go and run the workflow. I can actually choose what branch I want to run it on. And I can choose whether it's DAS or NetScaler. I'm gonna run the DAS because that's where I made the changes. And this is where it's gonna come through. I'm doing it manually. You can do this automatically if you want to. When we go and look at the plan, you can see it's going through and logs into Azure using the credentials that I've set up ahead of time with OIDC. So I'm not telling it what credentials to log in or how to get to Azure. It goes through and runs the Terraform init to make sure that all of the libraries are down and everything's ready to go on there. Once it does that, then it comes through and says, okay, I've successfully initialized everything. Then it's going to require the state lock. Remember me saying that the Terraform state is stored in the blob. I've got that stored in the blob. It has credentials to authenticate to that blob. It goes out and pulls that in. Then it says, okay, here's my current state. That's what it's pulling in. This is what the current state is of the file. Now I'm going to compare that to what was the change that's been put in on the files for function. And in a second here, it should pop up and tell me what I'm doing is I'm refreshing the state on it. You see it's checking the catalogs. So it's going through and saying, okay, he said he wants 10, he has 5. Is that right? Do I have that right information in there? And when it finishes up here, it will come up and tell me, okay, this is what I'm going to change. So we'll scroll up here just a little bit. And you can see that the latest version, it's kicking that out. This is the one, yeah, this is the image that was broken to the 2026-03. It's still trying to delete that 2026-03 one that I have here, but you can see that I've changed the number of machines from 5 to 10. Okay, but there are no changes on the 04 environment. It didn't change at all. So I got a good record of what I'm going to do and so forth. So then if I go through on the apply, it's going to go out, make those changes, issue the commands to Citrix console to go ahead and create the desktops and get the information going and, whatever changes I need to there. Okay. Any questions before we come off of the Terraform? All right. We had a good walkthrough. Again, I've got QR codes at the end for the link to that repo. It is a public repo. So if you want to go out and pull that down, fork it, bring it over, play around. Like I said, please keep in mind, it's just a skeleton. It is not fully operational at this point. I didn't want to give out that information. There are some things that I have on my side that are hidden files. Those files, if you go to this repo, you'll see something .example. So there's a good example of how you would set the file up. It's not my file. It does look like a good file, but it's not going to have my subscription ID and those kind of things in there, right? I know, I ruined everything. No fun at all. All right, so back to the presentation. So you're asking yourself, nope. Where's my? There it is. All right, so what does the monthly rebuild pattern look like? That's the information there, right? We refresh the image, I go out, run the PK bars, it comes out, we get ready to go. I apply my infrastructure as config. It does a smoke test. Am I going to break something? What am I going to burn down? And everything. Then, once I've done the smoke test and ready to go, I build up the new images. I publish that machine catalog out there. I put them into the delivery group. Once they're in the delivery group, then I disable the old delivery group or old machine catalog, and so everybody will slowly, as they log out and log back in, will go to the new image. The beauty of that is, if there's something wrong with the new image, real easy to flip it. Put the old image back as the active one. Everybody goes back to the active image. If somebody's having a problem, just tell them to log out, log back in, and they get a new desktop going back to where it was. Once I've got it cut over, then I'm going to go in and make the changes on those files, as I tried to do with the March one, but it failed. That will go in and it will actually destroy. So one of the things you do want to make sure of when you're going through this is you understand what changes are going to be made, because that plan, you'll see, it'll say so many to create, so many to change, so many to destroy. You want to look, if it says 1 or 2 things to destroy, make sure you understand what it's destroying. Because like I said, this does enable you to screw up on a big scale if you're not careful, right? In fact, I could go run Terraform destroy and then that variables file, and it would delete everything I have up in Azure. It would take all of that environment out. In fact, I'll probably do that in a few days now that we're done with the demo. All right, so you want to make sure you test all that stuff and then get things going. Right? Why the rebuild cadence reduces the risk? Because I'm getting a new generation of the environment. I think we've gone through all that. I'm running a little short on time, so we're going to go through that one real fast. The guardrails that make it trustworthy. I do the format and the validate. I'm doing a security scan. I'm going in and checking that information. I've got policy gates set up there to keep people from doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And I've got operational gates in place for controlling when the operations occur. What about emergency console fixes? You really don't want to make a change in the console, but if you do, make sure that you come back and make that appropriate change in your Terraform file so that your Terraform, when you go to run a plan, will match what your current state is. Okay? Emergencies happen, and stuff happens, you may have to go in there and do that, but make sure that you've got a process in place to incorporate that into what you're expected to have there. I said I would go through an adoption roadmap. For the first 30 days, you want to just pick one workflow that you're doing, automate that, get that info in there, create your repo structure. You can go ahead and build up a good repo structure of everything you're wanting to do, and then start in on that one piece. And then just run local plans, right? As I was talking about with the dev section, you can actually run it on a dev environment that doesn't matter. So that if you get used to how do I run these things to get that going. In the 31 to 60 day time frame, that's when you're going to add in the pull request validation. I'm going to go and require 2 other users to take a look, or 3 other users, whatever you guys feel like, that says, I need to make sure that this happens. Make sure that your secrets and everything are in where they need to be, require the reviews, and then add in the linting and the scanning for the security purposes in at this point, so that people are not getting frustrated with getting the code in place. They've had time to learn about it. Then from 60 to 90, now you're going to put in your gated applies, right? That ability for Git-Ops to actually run the apply without me having to go manually do that workflow in there. Do some checks on there, run your drift checks. Again, I personally think if I were setting this up, I would have a twice a day or 3 times a day plan run, and then send me a note if anything changes. Because then I know, did Joe hop in and make a change, or is somebody in my environment making changes that I'm not expecting? So I'm getting that feedback right away. And then, as always, the plan doesn't work till you tested it. So come in and do a complete rebuild and see what happens. Okay? What does it look like? I can review it. I can repeat it over and over again. Everybody can see what's happening, right? And I can come back and audit what was going on. That's the biggest thing. What can I keep track of? So do not commit secrets and real passwords. I think I've said that plenty of times. Don't use Terraform sometimes and console sometimes. That's going to be a nightmare for everybody to keep track of. Don't skip your review. Do not skip your review. You want to make sure you got those in there. Instead, use your repository variables, test the drift, etc. Start with validation and manual plan before you start doing the automated applies. All right, so make sure that you've got that step in there to go. So, quick takeaways. ClearOps is useful, but risky. All right, IAC captures your desired state and so forth. I'm not going to go through these too much because I think are we out of time? Close to it? Yeah. All right. All right. So, any questions? No? All right.
I have a question.
Yeah. What's the question?
It's the test environment and the production environment.
Mm-hmm.
You are sorting that out with your main or possibly your stage.
Yeah, you can. So in my environment, I've got a developer a branch and a main branch. So you can branch off of the developer, make your changes, do that testing in there, then merge that into develop and make that as your QA section to apply that to a different section. And the key to those is your variables can be different in each of those sections, right? So I can have one set of variables that connects to a dev environment. The next set of variables, different set of IP addresses, different subscription, different location, does it on development, and I can actually have machine catalogs and have actual users running machines from in there to make sure it's working. Once I'm sure that that's working, then I merge it into main. Once I merge that into main comes through, rebuilds itself, and creates that image. The nice part is the images are already sitting there, right? Packer's already run. I've already got all that stuff built. All I'm doing is then making a copy of that into the machine catalog to make it available to everybody. Okay, and again, the longer I keep them in the cloud, the easier it is for me to roll back. One of my things with machine creation services is it's usually only one rollback that I can do. With this environment, when I've got those images stored in Azure, as long as I'm willing to pay for the storage, I can keep 20 images to roll back if I need to. Okay. Another question?
Nope.
Did everybody get these? So that's the repo that I said I'll make public to everybody. That's for the Citrix Automation Handbook. If you haven't seen that, it's a great walkthrough. Section 5 covers Azure, or part 5 covers Azure, but it's got parts on AWS, it's got parts on Zen Server, I think, and multiple different ways to do the automation. And then the other ones I wanted to give you, just real quick, how do I start today? There's a Citrix Terraform provider that you can actually import your current Citrix environment and come up with a state and create the Terraform files. So I can actually take what I have, make it into a Terraform environment. So now I can go in and make the changes to push it back out. NetScaler has the same thing. Actually, we did a webinar on the NS Console IAC tool that will bring in your NetScaler config, build the environment, or it will set up the Terraform files and so forth. The only problem with these two is they bring everything in. So if you're familiar with NetScaler, I've got your main DNS servers. I don't need to put that in on a new NetScaler, it's already got, right? So it brings in the default config as well as everything that you change. It doesn't leave out the default config. And that's one of the things I'm working with them to try and get that out of there. But that allows you to bring in where am I today. So now I can go in if I want to make changes, I can change those files and push them back up. And I'm not going to delete something that's already there, but I can then start using Terraform tomorrow instead of having to go through and rebuild a whole new environment. Okay?
Great.
That's it. We're good. Appreciate it, guys.